to the Reimagine Mobility podcast series. I'm here with Mike Rowe from Autoliv. Mike, thanks for joining us. Why don't you give our listeners and viewers a little bit of a background of who you are, and then maybe a short description of what Autoliv does in the mobility ecosystem, and then we both dive into and reimagine mobility together here on this next 30 minutes of discussions.
Well, thank you, Stefan. Sounds great. So my name is Mike Rowe. I'm the Electronics and Mechatronics Sales Director in North America for Autoliv. Autoliv is the global leader in airbags, seatbelts, and steering wheels. And we're very focused on, reimagining mobility and how to make those new experiences and new features safe. So we're put a lot of focus on, how do we improve safety. What is the role of the steering wheel on autonomous driving? What is the role of the seatbelt on autonomous driving, as well as some other advanced development discussions? And really excited to have this conversation because some of the ideas that AVL has in smarter braking and these types of things, it's a very exciting time in the industry because there's a lot of overlap between a lot of these passive and active technologies. And we're even seeing instances where these passive technologies are becoming more active.
Excellent. So you sort of already moved into my first question, Mike, with your feedback on we're looking at steering wheels, airbags, and seat belts. A lot of times I think when we look at futuristic movies where we already have vehicles driving around autonomously, and even I feel like when I talk at times with people maybe outside of the, let's say, automotive hotspots globally, the perception seems to be, and again, the movie industry gives us the idea that autonomous vehicles will not need airbags, they will not need seat belts, because, hey, it's an autonomous vehicle, and why do you need this, right? It's going to keep us safe. So, Mike, give us a little bit of a perspective on how Autoliv looks at that and how they look at it, and on the onset of truly autonomous vehicles maybe coming into more our daily lives, maybe over the next 5 or 10 years.
Oh, this is what I do, and I'm happy to talk about this subject. I find it fascinating and all the nuance that comes with it. So looking at, the SAE defines autonomous driving into 6 levels. The futuristic movie one you're talking about would be level 5, which would be no steering wheel at all. In the last year, there's been a lot of discussion about this and a lot of debate, I would say, within the community, the safety community, and academia is level 5 even achievable to have a steering wheel that works have a vehicle that works in all conditions with no steering wheel? And that has been, I would say, a bit of a reckoning. And we've even seen some companies recently in Silicon Valley that were, really focused on green powertrain, new technologies, as well as autonomous technologies that have put those projects on pause. Where the market is now and where the industry is now, as far as I can tell, is we're talking about level 2 and level 3 mostly. Level 2 is typically the combination of adaptive cruise control with lane keep assist. So it's 2 driver convenience features. It's meant to reduce driver fatigue. And right now, there's not a safety benefit for that. Ratings typically drives regulation. Consumer Reports came out with their ratings about 1.5 years ago. The Insurance Institute for Highway Safety just came out with their ratings as well. That's really focused on safety. And I think this is really going to provide opportunities for the regulators to regulate, but also for technologies to help drivers. And some of the topics that we can get into is, when we start talking about impaired drivers or drowsy drivers or distracted drivers, these different features, such as, the smart braking technology that AVL has with adaptive cruise control, as well as the lane keep assist, it can kind of cover for drivers' bad behavior and what is the right way to implement those technologies and make sure that the driver is still engaged.
When you look at, and you just mentioned it, when you look at the regulators, right? I mean, you're responsible for the North American market, but Autoliv is a truly global player. If we maybe take the discussion on regulations, at least from what you see, or maybe how Autoliv also sees it a little bit on average, which regions or which countries do you feel are the most forward-looking? Again, this podcast is about reimagining mobility. So which governments, which regulatory bodies in what regions or countries do you feel are the most proactive in setting themselves up or setting a framework from a regulatory perspective to truly be able to adopt faster than others level 4, and again, assuming it's going to happen, true level 5 autonomy from a safety perspective, not necessarily from an automotive perspective of driving autonomously, but also again from a safety perspective?
Well, typically the Euro NCAP, the new car assessment program, they have a roadmap when it comes to, I would say, safety on the passive side, but as well as autonomous. And what some interesting things that stick out is cognitive detection. They have as a milestone in 2032. So how do you passively sense whether someone is engaged with the driving tasks mentally? And that's quite interesting. I have the privilege of working with a global research team where we are researching, interior sensing, occupant monitoring, human-machine interface, to be on the, I would say, front edge of, okay, number one, we talked about L2. The step would be to, first step would be to make these systems safe. And then the second step would be to make them usable for all people. So when it comes to car sharing, maybe in the future, or when it comes to you rent a car, you want to be able to experience this safety benefit. So I would say, just to answer your question, generally, there's a lot of activities by a lot of the European countries that are studying this on the front end. And really, we want to make sure that we're able to, I would say, standardize safety critical features and safety critical human machine interface across all vehicles.
Hmm. Let's go back to what you mentioned at the beginning. Autoliv, the global leader in passive safety systems, right? Airbags, restraint systems, or seat belts. But explain a little bit as it is today, and also as you guys at Autoliv see it going forward. Is it always going to be just an airbag and a seatbelt, or is there much more coming in? Is there much more interaction? You kind of mentioned with some of our technologies, maybe combining these things, and instead of looking at individual safety blocks or individual features and functions in the car, you look at a much more holistic or system-wide approach for passive or also active safety, quite frankly. So give us a little bit of perspective as what you see and Autoliv sees going forward, what passive safety or safety for occupants in the vehicles and drivers, obviously. What does this really mean, Mike?
Well, we pride ourselves on being the system integrators. So that means more than just the component itself. So our systems engineering is world class, and really we can simulate and virtually test, as well as physical test, how our products work within the overall vehicle ecosystem. But when you look at some of the future trends, right, some of it comes from EVs, some of it comes from autonomous. The interior cabin is changing. Obviously, there's more space. So Autoliv, we have airbags that fill larger and larger spaces with the same amount of inflator material using different principles, such as the Bernoulli principle. That's something that we can offer. But just to give an example of, I would say, the line that is blurred a little bit between passive and active safety would be our electric seatbelt. So though in a typical crash sequence, if you hit the point of no return, right, and you encounter a crash, there's typically a pyrotechnic element in the seatbelt called a pretensioner. So this goes off and it cinches your hips. The pelvis is the largest bone in your body. So this allows you to pivot from your hips, and then you can load into the airbag. And the idea is this will give you the most chest, or the least amount of chest and head deflection, right, to reduce injuries. In the case of autonomous vehicles and pre-crash braking, the occupant will move forward, obviously, as the car is braking. And if the point of no return is encountered, then the occupant is not ideally positioned. So we have this electric seatbelt, which is called, we call it a pre-pretensioning Mechatronics integrated, that actually has pre-pretensioning. So it takes the occupant and, using an electric function, pulls in towards the back of the seat, so that, again, you can have the most time and distance to experience the crash. But what we've also found is many customers using this seatbelt for autonomous, because when you start talking about how do we know that the driver's engaged, so we're giving them this adaptive cruise control, lane keep assist. Are they having bad behaviors? These types of things. In the case of a driver monitoring system and sensing system in the vehicle, if they notice this, they can use the haptic to pulse across their chest with the seatbelt. And research shows this is more effective than visual cues and chimes and these types of things. And Autoliv actually has globally over 50 million of these electric seatbelts in the market. And I think this is also something that we're going to see coming to North America as we continue to iterate autonomous driving.
Interesting. And Mike, you alluded it a little bit, I think, in the earlier part of your answer just now. But let's talk about simulation. How much simulation? Because in this podcast, maybe we, just for your background, we talk so often about the future technologies. And I think one common theme across almost anything we've talked about in this podcast over the last 2 or 3 years already, one way or the other, simulation, digital twins over the last 6 months, plus maybe AI as well, plays a huge role. Tell me a little bit in something as life and death critical as passive safety systems that you guys are doing. How much have you guys started to use the power of digital twins, of simulation, of AI to enhance your technologies that you just mentioned, but also further improve them, et cetera? Can you share a little bit there?
Yeah, absolutely. So Autoliv is very focused on safety equity. So, right, when you look at some of the test criteria, right, you're limited in the dummy sizes and mass, right, that you can test. And one of the areas we're focused on is absolutely virtual simulation. So this allows us to take more, demographics of humans, different shapes, sizes, pregnant humans, these types of things, and really start to simulate that. Really to arrive at safety equity. And that's something that we look at is we're looking at the data, of course, and who is experiencing those injuries, what do those systems in the vehicle look like, and then how can we improve outcomes for the vulnerable. And AI does play a role, of course. We are certainly seeing what that can do for us in our processes and systems, our research, as well as our virtual simulation.
When you look forward over the next 5 years, Mike, what excites you the most of potential to use outside of the traditional sensors that have been used and are still used today to deploy an airbag or tension a seatbelt? What additional sensors that OEMs are now starting to integrate into vehicle, be that driver monitoring, be that forward-facing cameras, LiDARs, radars, specifically maybe for more than just adaptive cruise or other types of features? What excites you the most? The possibility that allows those components that are now placed on a vehicle to further enhance the products you guys are providing, again from a systems perspective, obviously. Then
absolutely. So right now, driver monitoring systems and driver sensing systems is absolute paramount. Because just to take a step back, when you look at level 2, and this is a huge nuance. So again, adaptive cruise control, lane keep assist. If you have a vehicle that's equipped with this, it needs to make sure that you're engaged in the driving task in order to provide this feature. But the flip side of that is if the system doesn't work for you, you just get to drive manually. So every OEM wanted to be in the game, and they're allowed to be in the game by releasing these systems, but the systems really don't have to work, right? Because if they don't work, you drive manually because the driver is in a supervisory mode and has the liability if the vehicle crashes anyways. So what we see at Autoliv is this need for interior sensing, because if you know what the driver is doing, then the exterior sensors that are getting data on what's going on can actually also be used as input. The future is going to be multimodal between the interior and exterior, and the car can behave differently. So you need to know if the driver is totally out of the loop when it comes to the driving tasks that are being performed or, actively engaged. So some of the sensors we see, I would say 80, 90% plus of the OEMs, they use capacitive hand sensing on the steering wheel. Again, you need this for a functional safety approach to be multimodal. So it's not enough to know where your eyes are looking, whether they're engaged with the road or looking elsewhere, to know if you're ready to take lateral control of the vehicle. That's why the OEMs use capacitive hand sensing, because you have to know where the driver's hands are. You have to do it in a redundant sort of way in order to be certain, right, for the vehicle operation. And we see also that every car, I think within 2 or 3 years, a 2D RGB infrared camera is pretty much standard. And we see this as it's likely going to become the norm. So these cameras are typically, you have IR radiation irradiating your face, right? Like you're turning on your cell phone. And then these cameras are able to decipher your head pose. They're able to track the back of your eyelids as well as your gaze detection. There are a lot of other opportunities and new technologies coming in to occupant sensing. So driver monitoring systems, I personally believe, are going to be separate from occupant monitoring systems because the technologies will be different, right? A driver monitoring system is typically just only focused on the driver, occupant monitoring system and the entire vehicle cabin. And we see other interior radar, time of flight, these types of cameras and technologies that can provide, I would say, more of a 3D image than a 2D camera. As the regulation comes, when you're talking about, hot car protection for occupants and animals in the car, and these types of things, these interior sensing solutions start to make sense.
Interesting. Mike, maybe a slightly different question. When you work with OEMs in the US, but also Autoliv globally, what are some of the things you wish, if you could, 1, 2, or 3, up to you, how many you want to mention here, that these OEMs would better understand about the products you guys provide? Is it that in an only standalone way, they're much less efficient or effective than if it's, again, from a system level, much more integrated? Instead of, well, this is a safety system, we just put it in, we have to have it, it's a regulation, but so be it. Is it that, hey, paying more for a more advanced system really has tremendous payback in, I don't know, customer loyalty, brand recognition? I don't know. What are some of the things that you could say, I wish they, meaning the OEMs, would understand this better or see this differently?
I would just say in general, right? Autoliv has components that are capable of doing more, and it's not always understood. We take, again, a systems engineering approach, which is a functional safety approach, by defining requirements early on with OEMs, and in OEMs, I'd say being willing to have those technical discussions earlier. That could provide great benefit, because we're not trying to add costs to the vehicle. We're trying to make the vehicle perform better for autonomous driving and safety applications. That's really the motivation. So I am absolutely, I would say, agnostic I just want the best solution, and I want every OEM to be able to have a system that performs. And then the question becomes, and maybe it's a question for you, Stefan, is when will these autonomous systems start to drive buying decisions for consumers? So when you buy your next vehicle and you want this level 2 system, is that 1 year out, 3 years out, 5 years out, when that is going to be a purchase decision? Because of course we see these OEMs monetizing the vehicle post-purchase with a subscription service. So the idea is you're going to love your autonomous driving suite so much, right, that you'll continue to pay for it after purchase in order to use it.
Interesting. To make maybe a couple of more questions for you. One, as you look forward 5 or 10 years, as we again reimagine mobility here together, what excites you the most in your space, in the passive safety space, that you'll look really forward to, of A, being developed to a point where it can become a product, or B, maybe something that's the industry or you guys are developing that you feel in the next 5 or 10 years, OEMs will definitely start deploying this at scale, right? What are some of the things you're most excited about?
Well, I would say the advancement of the steering wheel. Steering wheels are going to be needed for some time. Something that I watch very closely is steer-by-wire. I don't necessarily share in the optimism that it's going to be here in the next 5 years for a variety of reasons. More so, it's, when you look at what's prioritized, green powertrain, autonomous, you don't need to have a steer-by-wire for a green powertrain or an autonomous vehicle. And I think there's a learning curve that comes with this when you start talking about consumer adoptance and acceptance. And it also would, the scalable solution, I would say, isn't yet determined, and it would add cost to a vehicle. But what gets me excited, I would say, in general, is one thing we're very focused on is the ECU inside of the steering wheel. So as autonomy advances, the steering wheel grows in importance more and more. So you can see the driver information center is likely going to go to a heads-up display. And then when you start talking about a human-machine interface, it's very important for drivers to know the status of the autonomous system. And our research shows us that putting that similar to a side view mirror, putting lane departure alerts on this, right? When the drivers are looking at this, it's very intuitive. Using the steering wheel to show the driver what is the status of the autonomous system. Is it in a collaborative driving mode? Is it engaged, disengaged? Because when you start telling the drivers what dynamic driving tasks are being performed before they know the status of the system, this can drive a little bit of confusion. And our research tells us that this improves driver behavior as well as trust in the autonomous system, because that point will come where, okay, the driver is going to trust the system and no longer necessarily pay as much attention to what tasks are being performed. They're going to want to know the status of the system engagement. So that, I would say, on the steering wheel side excites me, as well as on the seatbelt with this electric seatbelt, the safety benefit of pre-tensioning, how haptic can be coupled with the vehicle features. We can put different pulses based on different, situations in the vehicle, even using it as a teaching tool, right? So if you want to tell the driver, don't perform that maneuver again that you just performed, it's also effective for that. And also the other safety benefit is when you buckle up, it gives you a nice little hug to make sure that the seatbelt's being worn properly, and also can help you take off the seatbelt and reel it in a very repeatable way. So these, I would say, are the exciting things that excite me. And believe it or not, I would say another one would be one thing that makes North America unique as part of the bipartisan infrastructure law. There's been a lot of research on impairment. So impairment due to blood alcohol content. So we have a DADS program that's being funded, and I just finished doing a lot of commenting on a advance notice of proposed rulemaking from NHTSA. And really, they're looking for ways on how can we prevent, I would say, operation of a vehicle while you're impaired. And the idea isn't that the car will, call the cops on you, but the car will obviously not perform. So I really like this field of study. The challenge is there's a lot of overlapping behaviors between impairment and drowsiness and distraction. And really, what excites me is what ways can we come up with to really identify it as one of those three buckets when, again, there are so much overlap.
Interesting. And then that just brought me one more question before my final question, Mike. Have you guys ever looked into, as I know some seat manufacturers have and other ones have, kind of combining sort of some medical measurement, right? We have smart watches now that tell me my pulse goes up. Hey, you need to take a break. My watch already buzzed here. It's time to get up to move around. Have you guys thought about integrating that into seat belts, or is this usually something that then somebody else then brings to you and you integrate it versus you bringing it out as a standard product that Autoliv brings in? So sort of the combination of automotive passive safety with medical, I don't know, detection or measurements. Just interested in that.
Oh, absolutely. We have a demo you can see, but we spend a great amount of energy and even resources on R&D. So we have a smart sense seat belt, right? And really what it comes down to is you want vital signs on occupants so you can detect their mood and these types of things, and we can use this information, right? So that's when AI can be deployed. And right now we don't have, I would say, a best practice set of sensors in the vehicles, and really a way to monitor the humans to get all the info that we need. So one thing that we have, which is passive, which passive is preferred, you're not wearing a wearable, these types of things, is our Smart Sense seatbelt. This will allow us to measure respiration of the driver, which is very useful information. Obviously, the other one that you would like to get, but it's more difficult to get passively, is heart rate. But then this seatbelt also can tell us the approximate the size of the driver, so occupant classification, as well as the position of the driver, and also detect misuse of the seatbelt. So, for example, current seatbelts, they're just gonna be based on whether they're buckled or unbuckled. But this can also detect if you buckled up a seatbelt and put it behind you, for example. So this is very, very important for adaptive safety, right? So the size and position of the occupants, but also what are some of the vital signs that we can get. And we really, I would say, focused on the seatbelt a great deal, because as you're having hands-free experience, putting those sensors on the steering wheel, when it comes to vital signs, even blood pressure monitoring or heart rate, if you're not connected with the steering wheel, that makes less sense. But that's again why the capacitive hand sensing is so important, because you have to know if the driver is ready to take lateral control of the vehicle.
Interesting. All right, I think we can continue here for quite a while here. I have tons of questions. Super interesting topic for me. But last question, Mike, totally unrelated to what we just talked about, but what's going to be the next car you buy and why?
Oh, next car I buy. Wow, this is like I said, I am agnostic, but I would say being deeply rooted in the active driving assistance. I would say study, right? I get to participate in a lot of different industry organizations, advanced vehicle technology consortiums and such. And I watch the consumer reports and the IHS reports so closely. I think I'm going to take the challenge for myself to come up with my, learning from what I learned from them, my own evaluation criteria. And I want to buy the car that I think performs the best, when it comes to adaptive cruise control, lane keep assist, and the car that I believe will allow me to, I would say, pay attention to the road, but to reduce the most driver fatigue. And I certainly have some opinions on that of what that is currently in the market. I'll buy a car in probably 2 or 3 years, but I will say that's what I'll focus on.
All right, very good. And of course, with an Autoliv product in it, that's for sure.
There's a good chance it'll be in there.
Thank you very much, Mike, for joining us here. Very interesting. Thank you for your insight and very valuable knowledge. We appreciate it.